How's it going, everyone? As always, God bless you and thank you for being here. I'm Gage and this is Candy Coral Aquatics. If you're new here, please hit the subscribe button and tap that notification bell. This is where I talk about all things reefing. If you're not new and you're already a subscriber, I just want to say thank you for being back for more and for the support. So today's topic of discussion, you guys, is going to be about stability. Now, I want to forewarn you, this is going to be kind of a lengthy video. I want to get really in depth with this, and I haven't uploaded a video in a while, so just pop in some headphones, just kind of kick back, relax, and let's just talk about reefing for a minute. So when we talk about stability, stability can be defined as the state of stable. So really that's all we're trying to achieve long term is stability. Any dream tank that you've ever seen, you're like, oh my gosh, I want that. That looks beautiful. That's what I want in my tank. All these big successful reef tanks, they all have one thing in common. And it's stability long term. So how can we achieve stability from day one all the way to maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 years from now and get that big, beautiful dream reef tank that we've always wanted? I've tried to compile this into an easy to understand and follow along list. So as we get to each topic, we'll kind of just digress a little and discuss each one in a little bit of detail. So the first step in maintaining long-term success and stability with your reef tank is to choose equipment that is realistic for you. So this has to do with tank size. If you're busy on the road a lot, you don't have time to maintain a big 200-gallon tank, then don't get a 200-gallon tank. This is a 60-gallon cube. It's just right for me. It's perfect amount for me to maintain. I'm on the road a lot traveling with work. So on the weekends when I clean my tank, it only takes me, a couple of hours to get done what I need to get done, to feed the corals, do the water change, clean out my filters, all that kind of stuff. It's really just the perfect size. If I went much bigger, I just don't think I would be able to maintain it as well. So make sure that you're selecting a tank size and equipment that is not only in your budget, but it's realistic for you to maintain. The next step to maintaining long-term success and stability in your reef tank is to use good water from the very beginning. Okay, don't be using well water, don't be using city tap water. Spend a little bit of money, invest in an RODI system and make your own RODI water. Water is the building blocks to this. Water is the foundation to this. If you don't have good water, your tank will never maintain stability. It will always have algae issues. It will always have nitrate issues. There will always be something wrong because your water is not clean. So make sure from day one to achieve long-term stability, you're using good, high-quality RODI water. The next step into maintaining long-term stability for your reef tank is lighting. It doesn't really matter what kind of light you choose, just kind of set it and forget it. I don't care if you're using halides, T5s, or LEDs, you need to understand each type of light, what it's capable of doing, how much wattage it is, how intense it's going to be, and what its maintenance schedule is. Metal halides and T5s, you need to know that every few months you got to be swapping bulbs out, otherwise the wavelength changes and it's going to affect your corals and it's going to actually promote algae growth. Whereas LEDs, you need to understand that some of them are, pretty much all your high quality, high-end LEDs are extremely powerful, and if you crank those puppies up because you like the way it looks, you could be frying coral. So just make sure that you keep all of this in mind when you're selecting a lighting option for your tank, okay? And then you need to get your tank on some sort of a lighting schedule. Okay, it's super important to make sure that you have a good lighting schedule. I typically recommend anywhere between 6 to 8 hours of photo period. Anything more than that, I'm not saying you won't be successful, but you could grow more algae. It's anecdotal, but it's possible. There have been some studies shown that shorter periods of more high intensity lighting actually decreased algae growth and increased coral health. But I also have seen tanks that they maintain 12, 13-hour photo periods of high intensity lighting, and their corals are loving it and they don't have algae. So I guess every case is different. You just kind of got to find what works for you, but I think that's what I would recommend to anybody would be 6 to 8 hours of between, depending on what kind of coral you have in the tank, medium or high intensity lighting, okay, and then kind of adjusting from there. You can always ramp your light up. A coral is far more likely to die from too much light than not enough, okay? So just keep that in mind. Lighting is something that you can kind of ramp up and adjust as need be. The next step to maintaining long-term stability in your reef tank is the sand bed. Whether you have a bare bottom tank or you have substrate, each of them have their own unique challenges and differences. When we're talking about a sand bed, you know, don't go overboard. Excuse me, if you don't have stuff that is living and dwelling within the sand, like, you know, sand sifting stars, pistol shrimp, goby pear, jawfish, things that really need deep sand beds, then don't do a deep sand bed. I'm gonna take a drink for a second. Give me one second. Okay, so like if you look at my tank, I've got, what's that? Maybe an inch, give or take, and maybe a little more of substrate. I don't have anything living in there. I do have one pistol shrimp in here. He actually lives in the rock with the zoanthid colonies, and he burrows down into the sand and makes tunnels who knows where, and then he comes up and in and out of that rock. There's more than enough sand in here for him to survive. I mean, he's very tiny. So just make sure that your substrate, your depth of substrate is realistic for what you're trying to do. Because if you have a super deep sand bed, you have to maintain it. You have to clean it. If you don't, it's just going to build up with toxic gases, and it's going to be a nutrient dump for your tank. Okay, you're always going to have algae issues. You know, if you disturb the sand bed and it's not something that's being aerated and cleaned regularly, you do have the potential risk of releasing very toxic gases that can kill things in your tank instantly. So just make sure that you're maintaining your sand bed and that you're, you know, keeping it clean regularly. Okay. The next step to maintaining long-term stability in your tank is going to be a cleanup crew and fish with a purpose. Now, I want you guys to understand that the type of cleanup crew is going to be different for every tank, and the types of fish are going to be different with every tank. You know, the smaller you go in tank size when it comes to fish, sometimes the harder it is to be able to find beneficial fish that can help to keep things clean. Okay, this is a 60-gallon cube. I have a yellow tang in here. I would never put a yellow tang in anything smaller than a 60-gallon cube. You know, ideally, this tank should be maybe even a little bit bigger to have a yellow tang, but I was reassured by a man who owns his own store, who's been in the hobby for years, very knowledgeable, that a yellow tang would be just fine in a 60-gallon cube, so I went with it. But, you know, if you have a 30-gallon system, it's going to be kind of hard for you to find a lot of fish to help keep things clean, so you're going to have to rely more on a diverse cleanup crew. Cleanup crews are not an excuse to be lazy. They do help to maintain the overall stability of your system, but let's be realistic. You know, if you have 2 or 3 hermit crabs and a handful of snails in there, but you're feeding like a madman every day, there's no way that they're going to be able to keep up with that, okay? So you do have some responsibility in understanding and maintaining a good clean tank yourself, and then the cleanup crew is there to kind of help you out with stuff that was, you know, uneaten, left over, to get into tiny places that you can't, and to, you know, help aerate and turn over your substrate. When it comes to fish, unless you're doing a fish-only system, you know, I do really highly recommend that you put some fish in your reef tank with a purpose. And here's why. Just about everybody wants a mixed reef tank. If you have SPS and then you throw in zoanthids, guess what? You have a mixed reef tank, okay? It's very rare that you come across coral-specific tanks where they only have one type of coral. So when you have a mixed reef, you know, what your coral need obviously varies from each species. So in this tank, I have a lot of different kinds of coral. I mean, we have softies, we have LPS, we have SPS. I've got everything in here, which means that they all might need something a little bit different. So the feeding is going to be more regular. Maybe the light intensity is going to be a little bit more, you know, all that kind of stuff. So to have fish in here that serve a purpose and that will help me, you know, kind of clean up the things that are left over, like this yellow tang will help clean my rocks and stuff, clean of algae and things like that, to help prevent my bubble algae from coming back. You know, it's all about pre-planning and what can I put into my tank to kind of give me a helping hand. The next step in maintaining stability long term is, how often and how much are you feeding your tank and what kind of foods are you using. There's obviously cheap food, more high-end food, pure, cleaner food, and that really does kind of matter. If you're using dirty, cheap food, or you're putting just a lot of food into the tank, obviously that's going to pollute the water, and you're going to not be able to maintain stability. So when we're talking about food and feeding, it's important to kind of feed no more than what your fish can eat, maybe, in a minute. Don't be dumping in a ton of food because you're like, oh my gosh, I need to feed my fish. They're hungry. You're gonna be feeding them way more than what they can eat, which is just gonna burden your system. It's gonna burden your filtration. It's gonna burden your cleanup crew. A fish's stomach is about the size of its eye. So when we're looking at this yellow tang and this clownfish, as a general rule of thumb, we can say that their stomach is about the size of their eye. Well, I'm not going to dump 2 cupfuls of food in here because that's obviously going to be way too much for them to consume. So be realistic in the amount that you feed and how often you're feeding. If you notice you have high nutrients, maybe cut back on your feeding a little bit. Assess what you're feeding and how much you're feeding. Don't feed your corals as often. Realistically, your corals, guys, they really only need to be fed maybe a couple of times a week. It depends on what you have. Some corals are non-photosynthetic, so they need to be fed, a lot more. But for your general 90% of your corals that are out there, your mixed reef tanks, they can pretty much make what they need from the light. I do choose to feed my corals. Sometimes I will do a broadcast where I just put it in the tank, and other times I will do a direct feed where I'm actually squirting them with the food. It just depends on how you want to do it. I use both methods. But make sure that you're not overdoing it and you're not putting too much food into the system, because then obviously your filtration, your cleanup crew, and your fish have to be able to break all that down effectively, which more often than not, if you're overfeeding, tends to not be the case. So they tend to have a hard time doing that, and then that's obviously going to lead to things being dirty and unstable. The next part, or the next step into maintaining success long term with your reef tank, is going to be your husbandry schedule and time invested. I'm going to take another sip real quick. So when we're talking about your husbandry schedule and the time that you invest into your tank, this is going to be setting aside a specific day or a specific amount of time where you have nothing else to do but focus on your reef tank. For instance, every Saturday I do, a 10 or 15 gallon water change on my tank. I pull out my canister filter. I use the water I just pulled from my tank to rinse out and clean all of my sponges and filter pads that are in my canister filter. Every other week I'm changing out my carbon and my Phosguard and all this other media that I might have in there. And I'll be honest with you guys, in just 1 week's time, it's disgusting what I'm pulling out with this canister filter. It's insane. So if you're maintaining your filtration appropriately, it doesn't really matter what kind of filtration you use. Super reefers out there, you guys just need to take your cape off and you need to understand and relax and just realize that there's more than one way to skin a cat. Not everybody has to have a sump. Not everybody has to have dosing pumps. That's all a bunch of BS. If you maintain your filtration and you're watching what's going in and what's coming out and all the other stuff that we've listed so far, you're going to be successful. So every Saturday I dedicate about an hour or so to cleaning my tank, cleaning out my filters, switching my media bags out, all that kind of stuff. And that is one of the biggest things in having long-term stability, is an appropriate husbandry and maintenance schedule. Okay, there's no replacement for that. The next step in maintaining stability long-term in your reef tank is going to be water changes and salt used. So we need to make sure that we are doing water changes. I'm actually going to be trying to do a method where I do no water changes but top-offs. So I don't want you guys to think I'm being a hypocrite here, but my system is actually too clean. I have an issue with things being too clean. Okay, you do want a little bit of nitrate, you do want a little bit of phosphate. It's very beneficial for all the life. Not just corals, but all the life that is in your tank. So for me, because I don't have a ton of hard stony corals in here yet, I have a couple of SPS and a couple of LPS stonies, but I don't have a lot of stuff sucking out calcium and alkalinity from the water. I'm going to just, be dosing, testing, and doing auto top-offs. That way I can actually get my tank a little bit, quotation mark, dirtier. If I'm swapping out nearly perfect water with nearly perfect water, obviously there's no point to that, which is where I'm at right now. I need to get a little bit of nitrate in my tank and get my phosphate up just a little bit more. That's going to really be best for my corals and for my fish. But generally speaking, everybody should be doing water changes, especially if your nitrate levels are already stable. Really, I think the sweet spot for nitrates is anywhere between like 8 and 10 parts, and then your phosphate 0.03. I think everything would do just, amazingly at those levels. And that's what I'm going to try to achieve with my tank. But because everything is so clean, like I said, that's why I'm just going to dose essential elements and then do auto top-offs, and then maybe feed actually a little bit more. I don't really feed much as it is, which is another reason why everything is so clean, so I'm actually going to be feeding more. So obviously you can adjust things as necessary, but make sure that you are doing water changes and you're using a good high quality salt. So one thing I do want to mention about salt, I'm not going to mention, I guess I'll mention brands, but I just this could be completely anecdotal and completely untrue. I don't want to get sued here. I just want to tell you what my personal experiences were and what I think kind of was going on. So I used to use Instant Ocean. Now, I don't want you guys to get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with Instant Ocean. Instant Ocean is a great salt. It's the world's #1, salt for a reason. It's inexpensive. It has every major and minor element in there that your corals need. It's not that it's a bad salt, but what I noticed was sometimes it wouldn't mix as clean as I would like. I might have to mix it a little bit longer. It wouldn't dissolve as fast. But that's not really the issue, because a lot of salts will do that. The issue that I had was salt creep. I personally felt when I was using Instant Ocean, when my water was evaporating, I had salt creep all over my equipment. It would get slimy, greasy, you know how that stuff gets. It was on my pumps. It was everywhere, on the rim of my tank, everything. And that was back when I was using it in my 60-gallon long that I had years ago. Again, I'm not trying to say Instant Ocean is bad. It's a great salt. I used it for a long time, and it most definitely provided all the nutrients my corals needed. However, I do feel that when it evaporated, there was a lot of salt creep, okay? I have since switched to the Red Sea salts. I used the Coral Pro, and then I kind of switched away from that, and I actually went to the Red Sea Blue Bucket salt, which is just a regular salt. And the reason I did that is because as of right now, I don't have a ton of SPS in the tank, so I don't need those higher alkalinity, measurements. But since I've been using the Red Sea salt, I actually have not cleaned the rim of my tank or like my pumps or equipment once. Not one time have I seen salt creep. Okay, again, anecdotal. It doesn't have anything to do with the salt or not. I don't know. This is just what I have noticed, okay? This is what I have been using. So a good high quality salt, making sure that your salts are pure and clean. I'm not going to really get into what salt is best, because they're all more than capable of accomplishing what you want. It's a matter of preference, and it's something you guys can research on your own. The next component to keeping stability long-term in your reef tank is testing and dosing. Now these go hand in hand. You should not be dosing if you are not testing, and theoretically you should not be dosing something that you don't test for. So when we're talking about dosing and testing, I am a huge hypocrite when it comes to this. I couldn't tell you the last time I actually tested my tank, I took some water down to a LFS store and they just tested it for me. LFS, for you guys that don't know, just stands for local fish store or local fish shop. Mine's about an hour or so away, so it's not exactly local, but I took it down there. My calcium was fine. What else did they test for? Alkalinity was fine. But like I said, my water's too clean, so I need to dirty it up a little bit. But anyways, make sure that you're testing. If you have a lot of coral in the tank, it's super important to be testing. If you don't really have a bunch of coral, don't really worry about it as much. Just doing normal water changes is going to be more than sufficient. If you're using a good high quality salt, just regular weekly water changes are going to be all that you need to keep your tank parameters, your calcium, magnesium, alkalinity stable, and those trace elements, minor trace elements stable. But once you start adding a lot more coral, or a lot more stony coral, or what have you, then of course you're going to have to perhaps start dosing on top of doing water changes. Now, what you guys need to understand is that everybody, I think, kind of knows that hard corals use more calcium and stuff than soft corals, polyps, zoanthids, pallies, stuff like that. But there is still a small amount of calcium, alkalinity, and other elements that soft corals do use, and especially iodine. Iodine is huge when it comes to soft corals, zoanthids, and pallies. Like if you guys actually have zoas, I found this out because if you guys remember right, some of my zoas were not opening up, and now they're looking way better, and they're opening up a lot more now. I started dosing iodine, and this is only the second week I've done it, but I think I'm noticing a difference, and I think it's only going to get better long term. So iodine, calcium, magnesium, strontium, alkalinity, barium, all these things, these little minor and major things that corals use, understand that different types of corals consume them at different rates. So as you get more mixed coral, or as you get more coral in general, just be aware that you do need to be testing and replacing what's being used, okay? The next thing in keeping stability long-term in your reef tank is going to be making sure that you know what you have. Like, don't go out and buy a fish that you know nothing about. Don't go out and buy corals that you know nothing about. Make sure that what you're buying, you're well versed in, you've at least done a little bit of research, you have what it needs to survive and thrive, because at the end of the day, these are living animals, okay, so we need to respect that. And then also, if you go out and you spend $70 on a coral and you come home and a week later it dies, what have you really accomplished, okay? Definitely not stability, definitely not long-term success. So make sure that everything that you're putting into your tank, you have a little bit of knowledge on. You don't have to have experience with it, just make sure you have knowledge on it. A really good place to go, especially for fish, and a lot of times coral, depending on what you're looking for and what they have in stock, is Live Aquaria. I'm not saying you have to order from them. I have ordered from them in the past a couple of times, and my experience has always been pretty positive, but it's a great information source for reefers out there that maybe don't have a lot of knowledge in something. So if you wanted to get a yellow tang, okay, so, oh, Gage, I like the yellow tang, I'd like one. Well, jump onto Live Aquaria, look up the yellow tang, read about it. It'll actually tell you what water parameters it needs, what kind of food sources, all that kind of stuff. It's a great little area of information. Okay, corals, it's really hit and miss on. Corals are something that you might just have to do a little bit of side research on. Go to like a coral vendor like Worldwide Corals. By the way, none of my videos are sponsored, you guys, at all. I'm just throwing out names that I know from watching videos and following other people. But anyways, Worldwide Corals, Top Shelf Aquatics, stuff like that, where Tidal Gardens, actually, if you guys are not familiar with Fan from Tidal Gardens, I've been following him for a while. He's got great informative, good grief, videos on corals on his website, and on YouTube. He makes videos as well. But just make sure that you're doing your research and you know what you're putting into the tank and you know how to take care of it. And then I think the final piece that we're going to talk about tonight for stability, long-term stability in your reef tank, is your equipment. Make sure that you're running the appropriate equipment for your setup. A protein skimmer, people will tell you, is optional. I think it's a number one piece of equipment that every single reef tank needs to have. Because even if all your filtration is on point, you're changing your pads and your media regularly, a protein skimmer is going to be pulling out dissolved organics and things that are in the water that have, let's say, maybe already broken down, that your filtration might not be able to effectively remove. So a protein skimmer is actually going to be pulling out these nutrients from the water, and it's just a great tool in your arsenal for keeping a healthy, successful reef tank. If you've ever seen the kind of stuff that comes out of those skimmate cups, you'll know, you'll be like, oh my gosh, that's in my water. It's disgusting. So it's a great tool to have. But you know, there's a lot of stuff out there that doesn't necessarily make things more successful, but it makes things easier, like dosing pumps, auto top-off systems. You know, there's a lot of equipment. There's a whole plethora of equipment out there. But honestly, you guys, I would say a good key factor in success and stability is just keeping things simple. Yeah, there's a lot of equipment out there that'll really help you along, and you know, there's tanks that are pretty much fully automated. But part of the, I think, fun in this hobby and what makes it a hobby is getting your hands dirty, getting in there and cleaning stuff and rearranging and doing things your own way. And I think that's really part of the fun of this hobby. But there's definitely equipment out there that makes things easier. It just depends, you know, how much do you want to spend, and does it really make sense to do? Like I could do a dosing system. I could spend hundreds of dollars and put a dosing pump on here and connect jugs of, you know, magnesium, calcium, and everything else to it, and it could just dose for me. Or I could take 15 minutes, run a test, and add it myself and save myself $600. You know, it just depends on what you want to do. But I think that's going to be it for this video. That's, I guess, everything off the top of my head that I can think of. I guess one more thing to maybe add into equipment would be make sure you just get yourself a refractometer or some type of a maybe digital salinity reader. Don't mess around with hydrometers. I don't find them to be accurate or effective. A refractometer is really the way to go. And then also make sure that you're calibrating them appropriately, because just like, you know, our major and minor trace elements in our tank, if our salinity is off, that's going to have a huge impact on coral health, fish health, and long-term stability. So I hope this video has been informative. I hope you have enjoyed listening, and I really hope it has kind of shed some light on how to achieve long-term stability in your reef tank. I highly encourage questions. If anybody has any questions, please, guys, go ahead, comment down below. And even if you don't have a question, I would really like you guys to just drop a comment, let me know how I'm doing, and let me know if there's anything else that you guys would like to see in the future. I'm always looking for video ideas. I'm super busy with work, so sometimes I kind of just pull these out of thin air and make a video real quick while I'm thinking about it. But if there's anything you guys would like to see, please let me know, and please let me know how I'm doing. I would really appreciate it. I'm going to try to edit in some shots that I took of my tank earlier. My videos editing skills are very amateur. I'm going to try to do it. If I can't do it, then, you know, at least we have this nice constant kind of runtime of the tank here, and hopefully you guys got to see some of the cool little critters that I'm keeping in this reef tank. So anyways, that's it, guys. I'm going to get out of here. God bless, take care, and thank you.